Okay, welcome to part two of Joe and Diane on our way from Copenhagen to Sonneborg. After having tested some of the students in Finland and some of the ISM therapists in Finland for validity of their manual palpation skills and their ability to localize the thoracic rings and their accuracy. So, Joe, how do we test validity, or how do we know if somebody is gold standard or is really analyzing the data they're acquiring with their hands? How do we know?
There has been lots of research since the early 1930s on how do the hands collect data, and most of that research has been done by neurophysiologists. So anyone who's trying to understand how do we interpret touch? So how do we interpret what's known as active touch, which is me doing the touching? So how do I, when I touch something, how do I know it's hot, it's cold, it's round? How do I know its shape? How do I know where it is in my environment? And all we need to do is we need to look at that evidence. How are people trying to replicate robotic hands prosthesis? And the evidence is there that enables us to. The evidence is there that supports how we're going to do that. So all we did with the guys in Finland is we looked at taking that evidence and applying it to them. So there are certain mechanoreceptors that will enable us to understand the shape of an object, to ones that will help us understand where something is in space to us. And then there are many different ways that we can apply that. Natural break there. And then, then it's just about applying that to the guys. I don't think that's come across right, has it?
Yeah, it's fine. Yeah. So, as everybody you tested in Finland, so you did those tests on me in pool at your place.
Yep.
And I was nervous as anything to be tested, and thank goodness I passed all your tests and am gold standard. Was everybody we tested in Finland gold standard, able to pass all your tests for validity using their hands?
I think no. And I think there were one of the tests that we did on you that you struggled to get your gold standard.
Yeah,
but it was a matter of trying to enable and to provide that practitioner with the reasons why they weren't as gold standard within that mechanoreceptor activity. So some were one of the mechanoreceptors is palpatory discrimination, and if you have deficits and you're not quite gold standard in your palpatory discrimination, there'll be a reason generally for that, and it's trying to find the reason and then support the practitioner with, well, how do I make that better? What is it I need to do to bring that up to gold standard level? So there are 5 different tests. We can expand upon those tests, but within those categories, if you're not gold standard, then there are generally ways that you can improve it, like with yours. We found there was a deficit, then we looked at, well, why is that deficit?
So start from, like with you,
we found that you had a deficit within your spatial parameter in a certain approach of an assessment to a person. So then we looked at, okay, why is that when you do that particular method or motion that you're not up to gold standard? And then we were able to identify how we could improve upon that particular mechanoreceptor for you to ensure that you did get to gold standard. And that's what it was really aimed towards when we were in Finland, wasn't it? To try to help these guys understand them.
Yeah, so let me put this into the concept of ISM for some of the listeners. So in the integrated systems model, we look at movement and positional analysis a lot, and we look for the starting position of, say, for example, a ring. And in order to do that and to be valid, you have to be able yourself to get your own body into a zero axis, because in order to interpret what your hands are finding, you're comparing where the person is in relationship to where you are. And I have a third thoracic ring, which is always rotated to the right due to secondary old injuries. And when I reach my arms forward like this, my left arm is habitually longer than the right. So when I reach my hands over the top of somebody's thorax to palpate which way a upper ring is rotated, very commonly I know myself that I will make an error in judgment, because I will feel like the ring is rotated to the right because my left hand is forward, and I go around to the front of the person and I do it using a different test, and I confuse myself because I come around to the front and I think it's rotated the other way. So there's a processing error there, an interpretation, but I've always recognized that for myself, and I don't use palpation from behind somebody for an upper thoracic ring because I'll often get confusing results. And it's because I have difficulty getting my left shoulder into a neutral axis position. And it was interesting how this came out in the testing, in one of the tests of spatial orientation. And now that I know that about myself, I know how to correct it so that my findings are more valid. And that was the reason for taking everybody through all these different tests to determine where's their accuracy lacking. Because you don't want somebody in an intertester reliability study if they're not accurately interpreting information from their hands. And validity has never been determined before testing reliability. And that was a new thing, right?
Yeah, and I think it's really important for those of you that are listening to this that there are two mechanisms that are happening when you are placing your hands on someone to collect data, and that is data acquisition and then data analysis, and both those processes have to be optimized to ensure that when you're placing your hands on, you're in the right place and you're looking at the right thing and interpreting the right thing. But then there's also that integration, a whole body integration, to then be able to analyze that data and to then have a finding. And then report on a finding.
So one of the cool things that we did in Finland, and we also did this in Poole to ensure that our methodology was going to be good when we did it in Finland, is that we individually marked where some ribs of the rib cage were on the left and right side. We did it with ultraviolet pens so we couldn't see where each other had marked, shone a light on it, and then used ultrasound to confirm where we were. And we're very excited and happy that we had agreement and that we were actually accurately landmarking these things. And when we chose a few people in Finland to do this, the results were as confounding as most results in intertester reliability studies, in that they were all over the map. And yet understanding HODA-A and doing some interviews after we collected the data allowed us to inform ourselves and them as to where things were going wrong, and you have a huge list in HODA-A of all the web of determinants, all the things that could possibly go wrong that would make somebody unreliable on any given day. And it was clearly manifested amongst these people we tested. We tested them at the end of a long learning day. One of them was in a lot of pain when they were doing their assessments, and it was really cool to see how our interpretation of findings is hugely impacted by many of those things.
And I think as well, in the studies that I looked at, I think after the first experimental study that I did, there was a need to interview the testers and the testees to understand why the data was as it was. And I think the study that we did in Finland, the pilot study we did in Finland, really emphasized that, because we were choosing certain testers because of how we'd seen them perform during the 3-day course. But when they were in the study, we saw quite a lot of errors coming through with their data acquisition. But then it was about, I need to have a conversation with this person to understand that, because then when we would see them perform the next day, they were really good. So I think the asking the testers how they felt in the environment, but also, what do they feel? How do they feel that their HODA-A went during the study was really important.
Absolutely, absolutely. Because they're, any clinician will tell you that we have our good days and not so good days. And fortunately, in clinic, it doesn't always matter in the sense that you don't just get one kick at the can of helping somebody to get better. And certainly in ISM, this knowledge for each clinician in knowing how to explain to themselves why their findings are confusing or different from moment to moment, and what they need to do about it to be the best that they can be to help somebody else achieve their goals is it's huge. So thanks so much for all your research. It's fantastic. Yeah, you can't falsify me yet. Yeah.
No, I'm trying. And I will keep trying.
All right, so let's see what happens in Denmark. We have another trial coming up. We've improved our methodology. We have learned a lot from that study. And methodology is very, very important when you're testing the ability of somebody to use their hands, as is many other variables. The more we can control as many of the variables possible, I think the more accuracy we are going to get. Because manual methods, folks, are not going away. We need our hands. We absolutely need our hands to help people get better in conjunction with education and exercise. So,
we can see how we got here, though.
Yeah.
Thanks, Diane.